Welcome to a new series of messages. This is lesson number 2. And the title of it is kind of a coarse title, but it is Married to a Whore, because that's exactly a dual situation here. God was married to a whore, Israel. And Hosea was married to a whore named Gomer. God sometimes calls his prophets to do things that are unusual. And here is a very unusual thing. Who would want to be married to a whore? I mean, but God is. Israel, God divorced her. But I'll tell you a little bit about this book. Hosea is the first book of the 12 prophets in the Hebrew Bible. The prophet preached in Israel in the second half of the 8th century, somewhere around 789 to 725 BC, before Christ. During the reign of Jeroboam II, he was a contemporary of Isaiah and Micah in Judah, and began his career shortly after Amos's brief one in Israel. Hosea foresaw Israel's exile to Assyria, what we call the Assyrian captivity. Actually witnessed some of it happening. He was the last prophet of God raised up in Israel to try to get the people to repent. Hosea's job was 2 times sad, doubly sad, because at God's directions he took a wife who was just as unfaithful to him as Israel was to her God. This is supposed to be what we call a parabolic or a symbolic teaching. Jesus taught in parables, and this is a parable. This is a symbolic teaching that God is married to this whore Israel, and that this man, Hosea, which means Jehovah rescues, the first 3 chapters relate to the sordid details of the great and stormy, unfaithful marriage. Of the 3 children born while they were living together, only one was Hosea's child. In other words, 2/3 of the children are of whoredom. Now, again, in the book of Revelation, when we go over here to the book of Revelation, we find out in the tribulation period that 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die. Of the 3 children born to Hosea and Gomer, Gomer kept leaving Hosea, and she'd go off and fool around with her boyfriends and get pregnant, then come home. She'd get herself in such trouble. Then she wanted to return home and said, "Oh, I'm coming back, I'll be faithful." And as soon as she is back home and she's back on her feet again, she gets her eye on somebody else. And gone she is again. Hosea brought her back. And all of this was a symbolic, parabolic teaching that God kept taking Israel back in spite of her whoredom. But finally, in the end, it's all over. I want you to understand that Israel will never be the bride of God again. The church is the bride of God. At the cross of Calvary, Israel was completely divorced. The whole rest of the book, after the first several chapters, is Hosea's portrayal. It's like a movie, portraying the sins and the disastrous consequences of the actions of Israel. Through all of it, we see God's love and compassion, which stand out remarkably. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. The picture of God in Hosea is that of a loving husband who yearns desperately to have a faithful wife. You can't buy love. Love is a gift. You can't buy it. I can show you in my lifetime, 75 years of my lifetime, when women and men have been totally disappointed because their mates did not love them nor would ever be faithful to them ever. Israel, even though God inspired this book of Hosea, and this man to give his life to show in parabolic, symbolic form what Israel was doing to her God. They wouldn't turn around. The consequences of her sins Gomer's sins played themselves out. Now let's look. Always there is hope. Israel will not be the bride of God, but she will do her job for 1,000 years in the millennial reign of Christ. She will do that. God will use her to carry out his reign, epites geis, upon this earth. El haaretz. Now let's go and read this book. We're going to have to do several lessons here because this is a pretty long book. It's not 3 chapters like many of the Old Testament books are. Hadavar, the word of the Lord which came to Hosea the son of Beri. The name Beri means fountain. In other words, it's a fountain, flowing water.
Mountain.
During the days of Uzziah, Uzziah means strength of God, and Jotham means Jehovah is perfect. And Ahaz means possessor, and Hezekiah means the strength of God, the strength of Jehovah actually. Kings of Judah, and during the days of Jeroboam, and Jeroboam basically means the people will revolt or contend. The son of Joash, the king of Israel. Now, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said, Hosea, go take yourself a wife of harlotry, of a whore. Go take yourself a whore for a wife. Now Gomer means hot chick. She was a hot stuff. Okay, that's Gomer. Gomer means heat, hot stuff. And have children of harlotry, have children of whoredom, for the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking the Lord. Now I want you to do this to be a sign to them. He told one prophet, lay on one side for 40 days, lay on the other side for 40 days, and etc., etc., etc. These are object lessons. So we went and took Gomer, the daughter of Dilblain, and Dilblain means double embrace. And she conceived and bore him a son. Now this son is his. Okay? And the Lord said to him, name him Jezreel. Now Jezreel means seed of God. Seed of God. In other words, here, in the beginning she was faithful. She had the seed of Hosea. It matured and she brought forth Yelad. She conceived and brought forth a child. Yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodsheds of Jezreel. Jezreel means the seed of God. Now Jehu, we know that he did some pretty drastic things. And I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And I will come about, and it will come about on that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And then she conceived again and gave birth to a daughter, and the Lord said to him, name her Lo-Ruhamah. Lo-Ruhamah. Now in the valley of Jezreel, God is going to bring torment and misery upon Israel. Now Lo in the Hebrew, Lo is an adverb of negation. Okay? Lo-Ruhamah, and that means no pity, no grace. It means no compassion, no mercy on the house of Israel, and I should ever forgive them. They won't be forgiven for this. They're going to pay for these sins. But I will have compassion on the house of Judah. Israel is going to suffer the consequences. And what did Israel do? When they came back into the land, they built, on Mount Gerizim, they built another temple up there, and they had sacrifices, and they would only study the 5 books of the Pentateuch, and of course, Hosea is not one of those books. And this book is written directly to them. But I will have compassion on the house of Judah and deliver them by the Lord their God, and will not deliver them by bow or sword, and battle, or horse or horseman. Well, we know that they were carried into the Babylonian captivity, weren't they? And then later on they were there for so many years, and then God put it in the heart of a man to start reading the Word of God, and Cyrus the Great was there, and they said, you're going to let the people go back. And then she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah. She conceived and gave birth to a son. She's pregnant by somebody else again. Now she's pregnant by 2 different ones. There's 3 children involved here. 2 of them are children of whoredom. He was married to a whore. And the Lord said, name him Lo-Ami. Lo again is what? An adverb of negation. And Ami means people. And it says, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Now this child here that he has, he's not of the lineage of Hosea. It's not his seed, it's not his family. And God says, Israel is like this. Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it will come about that in the place where it is said to them, you are not my people, it will be said to them, you are the sons of living God. You are the sons of the living God, and the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together. And this is where they come back together in the end times. Actually, by the time of Jesus, of course, we have the Sumerians, and we have Judah, but Judah was called Israel. Israel is the covenant name of God that God gave to Judah, wasn't it? And the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will be appoint for themselves one leader, and they will go up from the land. For great will be the day of Jezreel. Now God is going to protect Israel during the tribulation period, isn't he? He's going to fight the Antichrist, etc. Now, in verse number 2, we have Israel's unfaithfulness condemned. Say to your brothers, Ami, my people, and to your sisters, the Rumah, and that means compassion. Contend with your mother, and contend, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband, and let her be put away, and her harlotry from her face, and her adultery from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked, then expose her as the day when she was born. And I will also make her like a wilderness, and make her like a desert land, and slay her with thirst. And she's going to be hungry, she's going to be cold, she's going to be destitute when she leaves her husband. I will have no compassion on her, lo rumah, on her children, because they are not my children, they are children of harlotry. For their mother has played the harlot, played the whore. She who conceived them acted shamefully, and she said, I will go after my lovers. I will go after my lovers. I will leave my husband, and I will go after my husband, lovers, and I will make him like it, so to speak. But he didn't. Who gave me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax and my oil and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge her up away with thorns, and I will build a wall against her that she cannot find her pathways. And she will pursue her lovers, but she will not overtake them. She will never find them. And she will seek them, but will not find them. And then she will say, I will go back to my first husband, for it was better for me than now. Roaming the streets. A woman roaming the streets for lovers. That's what it is here. A harlot, a streetwalker. But here, she's not selling herself. She's just lusting after anybody but her husband. For she does not know that it was I who gave her the grain and the new wine and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold. Have you known women like this? Have you known men like this? Which they used for Baal. Baal means the master of Satan. One of Satan's titles, Baal, Beelzebub. And people that worship these pagan gods are worshiping Satan. Therefore I take her back to my grain at the harvest time, and my new wine in its season, and I will also take away my wool and my flax, and give them to cover her nakedness. And then I will uncover her lewdness. The word lewdness there, in the Greek word, it is aselgia. It means unbridled lust. It means just let go. In the sight of her lovers, and no one will rescue her out of my hand. And I will also put an end to all of her gaiety. I'm gonna put an end to her laughing, her feasts and her new moons and her Sabbaths and all her feastal assemblies, and I will destroy her vines and fig trees, of which she said, these are my wages. When she went back to her husband, she would sleep with him a little bit, but she said, I'm a whore, these are my wages. My gold and my silver, my clothing, my bed that I sleep in is my wages of whoredom. Her husband was her, what we might call, national asset. God was Israel's national asset, which my lovers have given me, and I will make them a forest. And the beasts of the field will devour them, and I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she used to offer sacrifices to them, and adorn herself with her earrings and jewelry, and follow her lovers, so that she forgot me, and declares the Lord. Now, she did this to Hosea, didn't she? This woman did this. Now we're going to talk about the restoration of Israel. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, I will bring her into the wilderness, and speak kindly to her, and then I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope, and she will sing there as in the days of her youth, and in that day when she came up from the land of Egypt. It's talking about Israel in the past, the history of Israel, and yet using this woman as a symbol, as a parable of it. And I will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi, or Ishbi, and will no longer call me Baal. Ishbi means my man. You will say to me, you're my man. I'm your woman. You're my man. and love your man, Ishbi, and no longer call me Baal. I'm going to stop being a false god to you, but I'm going to be your real God one of these days. I'll be your Ishbi. I'll be your husband. No longer call me Baal either. For I will remove names of Baals from her mouth, so that they will be mentioned by the names no more. In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky and the creeping things on the ground, and I will abolish the bow, the sword, and war from the land. And I will make them lie down in safety, and I will betroth you to me forever. And I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and all compassion. See, all these words, they are figures of speech. He said, if you'll come back, Gomer, if you'll come back, this is what will be your prize. You'll call your husband my man. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you will know the Lord. And it will come about in the day that I will respond, declares the Lord, and I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth, and the earth will respond to the grain, and to the new wine, and to the oil, and they will respond to Jezreel, God's souls. And I will sow her by myself in the land. And I will have compassion on her who had not obtained compassion, and I will say to those who were not my people, you are my people. This is when God in the New Testament, this is prophecy, this is when God in the New Testament, when Paul talks about the Gentiles, he said you were no people, but now you are the people of God. In Genesis, the 9th chapter, as Noah spoke, he said that Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem, and this is what it's talking about here. And they will say, thou art my God. Now we have Hosea's second symbolic marriage. And the Lord said to me, go again and love a woman who is loved by her husband and yet an adulteress. Even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. The raisin cakes are offered to these pagan gods. So I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver, and homer and a half of barley. Then I said to her, you shall stay with me for many days. You shall not play the harlot, nor shall you love a man. So I will also be towards you. For the sons of Israel will remain for many days without a king or a prince, without a sacrifice and without a sacred pillar. This is talking about prophecy. Israel would be carried off in captivity, and they wouldn't have anything. Without an ephod of the household idols, and afterward the sons of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and they will come trembling to the Lord, to his goodness in the last days. It's talking about all the way over in the tribulation period sometimes. It's talked about in the New Testament period in the church age. Now God has a great controversy with Israel, and it's going to talk about that now. Listen to the word of the Lord, the sons of Israel. For the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land. The Lord has a law case. Because there is no faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in the land. There is swearing and deception and murder and stealing and adultery, and they employ violence so that bloodshed follows bloodshed, and therefore the land mourns, and everyone who lives in languishes. Along with the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky. When God's people were disobedient, even the animals of the field suffered for it. When Adam sinned, all of the earth was cursed. The animals were cursed with him, and they were innocent. and all the fish of the sea disappeared. Yet no one find fault, and let none offer reproof. For your people are like those who contend with priests. So you will stumble by the day. You usually stumble at nighttime, don't you? And the prophet will also stumble with you by night. And I will destroy your mother, and my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Again, New Testament. This is one of the key verses in this whole book. My people destroyed for lack of knowledge. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing these little Bible readings with Dr. Jim. Many people just look over these Old Testament books and they're very important, these little major and minor prophets. Because you have rejected my knowledge, I will also reject you from being my priest. Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. The more they multiplied, the more they sinned against me. I will change their glory into shame. They feed on sin of my people, and direct their desire toward their iniquity, and I will be like people, like a priest. And I will punish them for their ways, and repay them for their deeds, and they will eat, but they will not have enough. Never have enough. They will never be full. They will play the harlot, but not increase. Because they have stopped giving heed to the Lord, harlotry, wine, and new wine take away from their understanding. My people consult their wooden idols, and their diviner's wand, which informs them. For a spirit of harlotry has led them astray. And they have played the harlot and departed from their God. They offer sacrifices on the tops of the mountains and burn incense in the hills, under oak and poplar and terebinth, because their shade is pleasant. Therefore your daughters play the harlot, and your brides commit adultery. I will punish your daughters when they play the harlot, or your brides when they commit adultery. For the men themselves go apart with harlots, and offer sacrifices with temple prostitutes. The temples, the pagan temples, had prostitutes. They would go out and entice men, and they would take this, and they would lay with them, and they would pay them. And they would go give it to for the support of these pagan temples. So the people without understanding are ruined. Though you, Israel, play the harlot, do not let Judah become guilty. Also do not go to Gilgal, or go up to the Beth Aven, and take the oath, as the Lord lives. So Israel is stubborn, like a stubborn heifer. Can the Lord now pasture them, like a lamb in a large field? Ephraim is joined to idols, and let him be alone. Their liquor is gone. They play the harlot continually. Their rulers dearly love shame. The wind wraps them in its wings, and they will be ashamed because of their sacrifices. The people's apostasy is rebuked now by God through Hosea. Hear, O priest, give heed, O house of Israel. Listen, O house of the king, for judgment applies to you. For you have been a snare at Mizpah, that watchtower, and a net spread out at Tabor, gone deep into depravity, but I will chastise all of them. I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hidden from me. For now, O Ephraim, you have played the harlot. Israel has divided herself. Their deeds will not allow them to return to their God, for the spirit of harlotry is within them, and they do not know the Lord. Moreover, the pride of Israel testifies against them, and Israel and Ephraim stumble in their iniquity. Judah has stumbled with them, and they will all go with their flocks and herds, and I seek the Lord, to seek the Lord, and they will not find him. They have dealt treacherously against the Lord, for they have borne illegitimate children. Now the new moon will devour them with their land. Blow the horn of Gibeah and the trumpet of Ramah. Every time a new month came, they blew the horn. The trumpet of Ramah and the sound alarm of Beth-aven. Behind you, Benjamin, the house of evil. Ephraim will become like desolation in the day of rebuke. Among the tribes of Israel I declare what is true and sure. The prince of Judah have become like those who move a boundary. That's crooked. When you move a property line. On them I will pour out my wrath like water. Ephraim is oppressed and crushed in judgment because he was determined to follow man's command. Therefore I am like a mouth to Ephraim, like a moth, like rottenness in the house of Judah. When Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah his wound, then Ephraim went to Assyria and sent to King Jareb. But he is unable to heal you or to cure you and your wound. For I will be like a lion to Ephraim, and like a young lion to the house of Judah. Even I will tear to pieces and go away. I will carry away, and there will be none to deliver. I will go away and return to my place, until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face, and let their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. Now the response to God's rebuke. Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us, but he will heal us. He has wounded us, but he will bandage us. He will revive us after 2 days, and he will raise us up on the 3rd day, that we may live before him. And again we have the prophecy of the Messiah. So let us press on to know the Lord, and going forth is as certain as the dawn. And he will come to us like the rain, and like the spring rain watering the earth. And what shall I do with you, O Ephraim? What shall I do with you, O Judah? For your loyalty is like the morning cloud, and like the dew which goes away early. Therefore I have hewn them in pieces by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth. And again we go back to go forward to Revelation, the 19th chapter. The sword of his mouth. And the judgment on you are like the light that goes forth, and I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice, and the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. And again here we see a much quoted verse in the New Testament. Paul quotes this verse. But like Adam, they have transgressed the covenant. There they have dealt treacherously against me. Gilead is a city of wrongdoers, tracked with bloody footprints. They gone out and they murdered and killed and walked in the blood of their victims, and they're tracking the blood on their footprints back home. And as the raiders wait for a man, so a band of priests murder on the way to Shechem. They kill on the way to church. Sure, they had committed a crime. And in the house of Israel, I've seen a horrible thing. Ephraim's idolatry is there, and Israel has defied itself. Also, O Judah, there is a harvest appointed for you, when I restore the fortunes of my people. So the law of sowing and reaping, as Paul quotes in the book of Galatians. When I will heal Israel, the iniquity of Ephraim is uncovered. The evil deeds of Samaria They deal falsely. The thief enters, the bandits raid outside, and they do not consider in their hearts that I remember all of their wickedness. Now their deeds all are around them. They're surrounded by their deeds. They're surrounded by their sins. They are before my face. With their wickednesses they make the king glad, and the princes with their lies. They are all adulterers, like an oven heated by the baker, who ceases to stir up the fire from the kneading of the dough until it is leavened. On the day of our king, the princes become sick with the heat and wine. He stretched out his hand with scoffers, for their hearts are like an oven. As they approach their plotting, their anger smolders in might. In the morning it burns like a flaming fire. And all of them are hot like an oven. And all they consume their rulers. And all their kings have fallen, none of them calls on me. Ephraim mixes himself with the nations. Ephraim has become a cake not turned, soft in the head. A cake not turned, you put a pancake on top of a stove and you leave it like that and you just take it and put it on the plate. It's raw on top. Soft in the head means he's not all there. A cake not turned. Strangers devour his strength, yet he does not know it. He's stupid. Dummy, for sure. Gray hairs are also sprinkled on him, yet he does not know it. Through the pride of Israel testifies against him, yet they have neither returned to the Lord their God, nor have they sought him for all of this. So Ephraim has become like a silly dove without sense. They call to Egypt, they go to Assyria. When I go, I will spread my nettle with them, and I will bring them down like the birds of the sky, and I will chastise them in accordance with their proclamation to their assembly. Woe to them, for they have strayed from me. Destruction is theirs, for they have rebelled against me. I will redeem them, but they speak lies against me. Have you ever seen an unfaithful woman accuse her husband of adultery or whatever? Become so jealous and scream and just scream. And they do not cry to me from their heart. When they wail on their beds for the sake of grain and new wine, they assemble themselves. Turn away from me, although I trained and strengthened their arms, yet they devise evil against me. They turn, but not upward. They are like a deceitful bow. Their princes will fall by the sword. Because of the insolence of their tongue, this will be their derision in the land of Egypt. Sowing and reaping. Number 8. Put the trumpet to your lips. Like an eagle, the enemy comes against the house of the Lord. Because they have transgressed my covenant and rebelled against my law, they cry out to me, my God, we are of Israel, know thee. Israel has rejected the good. The enemy will pursue him, and they will set up kings, but not my kings. They have appointed princes, but I don't know them. With their silver and their gold they made idols for themselves, that they might be cut off. He has rejected your calf, O Samaria, saying, my anger burns against them. How long will they be incapable of innocence? For from Israel is even this, a craftsman made it so. It's not a God. You can't, a craftsman, I don't care how talented you are. Marilyn and Sharon are both artists, but I don't care how beautiful things you do, you can't make a God. Surely the calf of Samaria will be broken to pieces. For they sow the wind, and they reap the whirlwind. The standing grain has no heads. The the crops don't have any fruit in them. They don't have any produce, no grain. In yield, there's no grain. Should it yield strangers who would swallow it up? Israel is swallowed up. They are now among the nations. They were carried out among the nations. They came back as half-breeds. Like a vessel in which no one delights. Well, they have gone up to Assyria. Ephraim has hired lovers. Even though they hire allies among the nations, you can't go make a covenant with other people. God told them not to do that, but to go and make a covenant with other people so they can fight against the enemies that God has sent to correct them, to chasten them. Now I will gather them up, and they will begin to diminish because of the burden of the king of princes. Since Ephraim has multiplied altars for sin, they have become altars for sinning for him. Though I wrote to him 10,000 precepts of my law, they have regarded it as a strange thing. As for my sacrificial gifts, they sacrifice the flesh and eat it. But the Lord has taken no delight in them. Now he who will remember their iniquity and punish them for their sins, they will return to Egypt, for Israel has forgotten his Maker and built palaces. And Judah has multiplied fortified cities, but I will send a fire on its cities, that it may consume its palatial dwellings. We'll stop right there for this message. What a story, huh? What a story. This might remind you of things in your past and people that you've known. Unfaithful women and unfaithful men in people's lives. You can't make somebody love you. Love is a gift. You cannot make somebody love you. Love is a gift. And love is faithfulness. And love is love. And God is trying to correct these people and turn them back to Him, but they continue not to hear. They said, you perish for lack of knowledge. Many of these quotations that we read from the book of Hosea are all over the New Testament. Israel, us, you and me. These are lessons for us. Paul says that the Old Testament is written for parables for us. It says ensembles in King James, but it means parables. It means figures of speech. The Old Testament is written for us, that we might not repeat the sins of Israel. Our Father, we